Hey everyone, welcome to the second lesson of our Intro to Web Development course. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about CSS, which is super fundamental when it comes to web development, and it's where all your design happens inside a website. So HTML is pretty much the bare bones of a website, and how you make it look good, like the website on screen right now, the Tech Optimum website, is using CSS. So let's go ahead and open VS Code and navigate to our project. So to get started with CSS, all we have to do is declare a link tag that pretty much links our external style sheet to this page. And for the sake of this lesson, we're going to be focusing on external CSS, but there are other types of linking CSS such as internal CSS, which is simply putting it inside a style tag. And the other way is inline CSS. So if we only wanted to manipulate something like this h1 tag, we can simply type our CSS right inside this inline tag. But let's go ahead and declare a link tag right here. Let's go ahead and set the rel to style sheet, which will make our HTML think that this is meant for styles, obviously. And let's go ahead and set that href to styles.css. And close it off. And now basically what this code will do is it'll search for a file called styles.css, and it'll go ahead and apply all styles to this page's code. So let's go ahead and create a styles.css page. And so now that we have that created, we can go ahead and write all of our CSS for this project inside this styles.css folder or file. And before we get started with writing our first lines of CSS, we have to understand the basic selectors of CSS. So some basic selectors include type selectors, which can include h1, p, or div tags, or pretty much any HTML tag. The second most common type is a class selector, which is assigning a class to an HTML element and calling it by doing dot class name and then putting your CSS after that. The third most common way is using the ID, so it's just hashtag and then your ID name. And then the fourth most type is a universal selector, which is pretty much an asterisk that covers the entire HTML file or project. There are a few more types of CSS selectors, but those are the main ones that we're going to be focusing on in the scope of this course. So let's go ahead and work on type selectors first. So if we go back to our index.html file, you'll see that we have an h1 tag right here. Let's go ahead and create another h1 element called "This is a very cool website." And let's navigate here. And as you can see, it says "This is a very cool website." And you also see our other h1 tag right here. So if you notice this tag, you would refer to it as an h1 tag. So same way as you refer to it when you're talking, you just type h1 and then brackets. You can set things like the color of the text, background color, font size, how it aligns on the page, whether it's right, left, center, things like font family, and some other, there's a lot of CSS things, but we'll just be focusing on the basics in this lesson. So let's go ahead and make this h1 tag a green text color. So if you noticed, we just simply put it in brackets and then we put color, colon, and then our color, and a semicolon at the end. And so if we go here, as you can see, the color is green. Now what if we wanted to change the font family of this h1 tag? So we can simply do font-family, and then we can go ahead and select any font family from here. These are just the basic HTML ones, but there are a lot of other ones, and the most common type of fonts that people use are Google fonts or some other external fonts, but Google is probably one of the most common ways people get some other cooler, fancier fonts into their file, but we'll be covering that later. So let's just go ahead and select one of these styles. So let's go ahead and do Verdana and put a semicolon, and as you can see, it changes the font family of this h1 tag. Now if you haven't already noticed this, if you type in something like color, as you can see, you have a bunch of options for color. You have things like background color, scroll bar color, border color. There's just a bunch of different CSS attributes that you can assign to something. If you type in something like border, as you can see, there's border radius. You can set the border width of something to a specific amount of pixels. You know, CSS is really endless, and the possibilities of making a website look good are pretty endless, and you'll never get bored with CSS because you'll always be learning new different types of ways to design something more efficiently. So for the sake of this, let's go ahead and create a border. First, when setting a border, we have to declare how many pixels wide the border will be. So let's go ahead and set this to 3 pixels. Then we can select solid or something like dotted. As you can see, dotted comes in as an option. There's some other ones, but let's go ahead and do solid. And let's go ahead and set the border color to gray. And as you can see, it shows the border like that. Now what if we wanted the box of this h1 tag to stop around right here? We can go ahead and do max width fit content, and as you can see, it fits the content. Now what if we didn't want it to fit the content and we just wanted a default amount of pixels to follow? So let's do 600 pixels, and as you can see, it stops right there. Pixels are just one way of measurement in CSS. Some other common ones include 3 rem, and as you can see, that's pretty small. We can change it to 20 rem. As you can see, that's a decent size. There's also m. We can do 20m, which is commonly used for font sizes. 30m. But for the sake of this lesson, we're just going to be focusing on rem and pixels, so don't get confused by all these other words that you'll be learning in CSS. So now that we understand how to select an element like an h1 tag, let's go ahead and select a class to one of these elements. Let's go ahead and select our ul or unordered list tag and set a class as unordered list. And to do this, you just simply go inside this component or tag and you just type class equals your class name. So for this, we did unordered list. There's an extra d right there, so unordered list. And to call it, all you have to do is dot unordered list. Let's go ahead and do something like set the background color to aqua, and let's scroll down to see it, and as you can see, it sets the background color to aqua. Now what if I wanted to assign my class to more than just this unordered list? I can go ahead and copy that code and paste it inside this h1 tag and this h6 tag. And so as you can see, it changes the smallest title, the biggest title, and our unordered list. Now class names are extremely useful when trying to make efficient HTML and CSS code, as it reduces your amount of CSS that's processing in a website. So the more times you can condense your code into reusable things using classes, the better it'll be. So let's go ahead and go back to VS Code. Let's say I want to set our background color of this entire website to gray. How am I going to do that? So it's pretty simple. You just use a selector just like h1 called body, and you just type background color equals gray. And as you can see, the background color of this entire div turns to gray. Now let's go ahead and do something with this simple link that we have right here. Let's go ahead and create a cool little animation. So let's go back to our index.html and assign this a tag of a class of awesome-link. Let's get rid of these extra quotation marks, and let's go back to our styles and let's write awesome-link. And let's go ahead and set the color of this to a custom hex code. We can simply type blue to bring up our hex code selector. Let's go ahead and select this nice purple color. Let's go ahead and set the font size to 28 pixels. Let's go ahead and get rid of the text decoration. So we can do text decoration none. And if you noticed, there are a bunch of options for text decoration. There's dotted underlines, double line through, which will cross it out obviously, and some others. So let's go ahead and do text decoration none. Let's go ahead and set something called the transition to 300 milliseconds, which will ensure for a smooth transition when transitioning from on hover to off hover. Let's go ahead and dive into something called padding, and let's go ahead and set padding to 10 pixels. Let's go ahead and set our margin to 20 pixels, and let's go ahead and see how it looks. So this is how our code looks so far. And to differentiate padding and margin, they're pretty similar but very different. Padding essentially extends your HTML box, and margin leaves a gap outside of your HTML box. So if you notice, I'm hovering not on the text, but around 10 pixels outside of the text. So what if I were to change this padding to 50 pixels? As you can see, I can click all the way out here, which is not on the text, and it will still click on the link that forwards to Google. But if I were to change this back to 10 pixels and margin back to 50 pixels, it'll stop around right here, and I won't be able to click on it if I click right here or anywhere else. So to add a cool little animation, we're going to select the awesome link again, and let's go ahead and set the attribute to hover, and then our brackets. Let's go ahead and select the color to blue, and let's go ahead and change the hex code a little. Let's do this cool color, and let's make it have text decoration when it's being hovered. Let's have it do some dashed text decoration. Let's go ahead and select the font size, and let's go ahead and change that to 50 pixels. Now let's go ahead and navigate back here, and as you can see, if you hover over it, it'll change the font size, things like the color, and a few more things when you're hovering on it. Now what if we were to remove this transition property? It's going to be very choppy, and as you can see, it's super choppy. So that's why when creating transitions on things like your links, you'll always want to declare some sort of transition, may that be a few seconds using like 5s or 10s, which stands for 10 seconds, or something in milliseconds like we're doing right here, which is 300 milliseconds. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll go much deeper into CSS, and we'll dive into the layout and positioning aspects of CSS, introducing new concepts such as flexbox and grid. We only covered maybe 7 or 8 of the different CSS attributes in this lesson, but be sure to Google CSS attributes and mess around with it. Set different things like the color, width, height of a text, font size, select different things like a div or an image, give it some border radius for some curves. Mess around with your web page and see how it turns out. So be sure you have a basic understanding of selecting HTML elements, which includes the basic selector like an h1 or body selector, and the class name selector. And in the next lesson, we'll go deeper into CSS, so I'll see you then.